Hello, and welcome to episode 35 of the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast. Mark Eddy with Leadership Southern Indiana will be sharing with us today about managing a significant increase in programs.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast, where your host, KIRSTEN BULLOCK, interviews nonprofit CEOs and executive directors who share what's working. Show notes can be found at nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Please add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hi, Mark. Thanks so much for coming on the show and joining me today.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
In his 6 years at Leadership Southern Indiana, Mark Eddy has transformed the organization from a one-stop program shop to an organization serving all generations of professionals, both in development and diversifying funds to accommodate the growing organization. They've added 3 new programs, and funding has increased by about 300% since he joined the organization. Mark is also dedicated to community service as he serves on 6 nonprofit boards. Mark and his wife, Jan, have 4 sons, aged 16 to 31. He's an elder at his church and also spends his time coaching soccer and with his family. Mark, to kick us off and provide some context for our listeners, could you share a little bit about Leadership Southern Indiana and the work that you do?
Sure. Leadership Southern Indiana we're celebrating our 35th year this year.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. For about 29 of those years, it was pretty much a one-program organization. It was a community-based leadership program that was about trying to get you to know the community, where you can get involved, and how you can impact the community, where you can get plugged in at. And that has been very successful, and it's, was a great opportunity. But, over the years, the board wanted to go somewhere else and add some different things to it. So we really have worked, here lately to grow. So anyway, we've changed our mission here recently to engage, develop, and mobilize regional leaders who will serve and transform our community. And so when you look at those type of things that we're trying to get accomplished, that mission really brings it home exactly what we want to try to do.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine the other leadership programs around the country are probably evolving similarly and expanding what they're doing. Have you seen any national trends with other leadership groups?
Kirsten, it's a real good thought. You would think that would be happening. But what we're finding out is there's 2 thoughts. One is the group that's satisfied what they're doing. They don't want to change. They don't want to be anything different. And they still offer that one program. Then you have the other side, which is where Leadership Southern Indiana is at, feeling like we have a lot more to do. We have a lot more we can offer, and we need to be more involved in the community to help develop community leaders. And that's where we're at. So it's about half and half. It's either people have a small organization or they're getting bigger. So anyway, it's an interesting thing to watch.
Oh, I bet. So when you first joined the organization and you started looking at the program that was being offered, and where did the idea come from to expand that? Was something you brought in, or was the community just hankering for something more?
Yeah, the community had already started the conversation with the alumni. The alumni were very excited about about the program, Leadership Southern Indiana, as it was known at that time, and they kept saying, "This is a great program, but so what?" And so what, man? What do we do now? Where do we go from there? They just felt like there was more they wanted to do, and they felt like, okay, this is nice, this program I've gone through this year, and then the next year I help a little bit, but then we're not doing anything beyond that. And so when they hired me, they asked me specifically to look at this as an entrepreneur and to see where I could take it. What next levels could we, achieve and reach beyond. And so that's kind of the impetus of getting this started and moving us forward.
Great. So a combination of the community wanting something more and then you starting that discussion. Was there any pushback from anybody in the community when you started going down this route?
There was, because of the branding change. Just some of the old alumni were a little taken back because they didn't want the logo to change. And that was all done before I came on board, fortunately. But I still, being the new guy, they still looked at me as the one causing the change. But one of the things that I've learned from previous stops along my way is that you don't just sit back and avoid those people. You go at them and you try to get them involved and try to find out what's your thoughts about this and why, And I remember one person in particular I went to, he was somebody who was in the charter class, and he said, "Now remember, you're the one who called this meeting, not me." And it was funny, but now we're pretty close friends, and he's not afraid to call me and let me know what he thinks, and I'm not afraid to call him, let him know what I think. But it was interesting, he would never have been engaged now if I wouldn't have made that call, initially, to let him know that he's still valued. And just because the logo changed, the branding changed, doesn't mean the qualities, the values of the organization's changing.
Mm-hmm. So I guess a good lesson in that could be that just because somebody's upset at the moment doesn't mean that they can't be valuable in the future and a good advocate in the future.
You're definitely right. I mean, there's always emotions attached to any growing. And you just have to be respectful, respectful of people's values, their thoughts. As long as you're listening, it doesn't mean you still might not take their thoughts, but you have to at least listen.
Great. And through that whole transition and that time period, what do you see as you or your team's greatest success in that?
The success has been able to manage through it. And to be able to grow the organization to where we actually could add staff. When I first started, I was the first full-time staff person, and then we had like a part-time person helping us. And now today, of our team, we have 2 full-time people and 2 part-time people, which I would never have even imagine that back 6 years ago. I'm starting my 7th year with the organization, but I just couldn't imagine us being there at this time. But I also now see it as, where's it end? I feel like it can continue to grow even after I leave.
Mm-hmm. And in adding the staff, how did that happen? I know there's a lot of organizations, people who might be listening in, they might be half-time, they might be full-time, they might be doing this as something on the side. How did you make that decision to add that first staff person? And which came first? Was the money there, or did you just step out in faith?
Well, a combination. The need was there. And then this kind of goes, this next thing I'm going to say is really important. The board support was there to do it. One of the things, I remember the day we decided to take this risk, because it was a little bit of a risk, the board said, "Now this is what I'm on this board for." Is to make change, make things happen. And so, that was real exciting to hear. They weren't just a board waiting to step back. They realized sometimes if you don't risk a little bit, you're never going to reap those big rewards. So we weren't quite sure where the money was going to come from, but it's been amazing. Every year we have increased our budget. I think I've shared this with you maybe before, but it says 300% increase. We've gone from like a $95,000 budget when I first started. We're over $330,000 this year. And each year we've grown. I'm thinking, where's this extra 50,000 going to come from? And just through the whatever it is, hard work, whatever it always happens. So I think if the board believes in it, in the organization, the community gets behind it, believes it, and you have good programming, good quality programming, then the money's there. The money will always be there.
And how has your funding pool changed over the last 7 years? If it was 95,000, now 330,000, has that come primarily from program fees or corporate sponsorships? Or a combination?
Yeah, it's a combination of things. When I look at the percentage of what comes from sponsorships, what comes from tuition, what comes from alumni support, that percentage really hasn't changed much. It's just the increase in all those areas has changed. Sponsorships definitely have increased, but tuition has increased. We've seen that. We've seen alumni support increase some, but also we've seen individual donations. Other than like alumni memberships, we never really had sought out, individual donations before, and that's really where I see our next growth coming from, is people supporting us, individually, that are maybe not alumni now. And that's, I just finished my fundraising certification in fundraising management from the IU fundraising school. And that's kind of where I'm kind of my next focus, and trying to build an endowment for our organization. And cause like when I do leave someday, I want to be able to know that we've got something started that's sustainable.
Absolutely. Now, change is hard, and I would imagine that there may have been a moment or two where you were just pounding your head thinking, oh my goodness, what have I got myself into?
Every day.
If you had a moment like that, would you mind sharing with us? Some people might call it a failure, some might call it a learning experience. Is there a story that comes to mind for you?
Well, I think, it's important that I do fail quite often for me to learn. And probably one of the programs that we started that is now kind of like the star of our organization is our Engage program. But when we first started it, I really worked with a lot of volunteers, and I am not a guru at developing programming. I don't look at myself that way, but I do count on volunteers to help us and use their skills to develop those. And we did kind of a fast launch of that program, and we were all ready to go. I was out recruiting. In fact, I almost had a full class for that program that first year. And then all of a sudden, working with the group, they put the brakes on because they were afraid they weren't ready. And so I had to go back to all those people I had just recruited and tell them, sorry, we're not going to do it this year. I had to go back to the funders and say, hey, I'm sorry, we're not going to do it this year. And so while it was embarrassing to some point, it was something that it helped me to understand that I really need to make sure that we're all on the same page before we launch something, launch an initiative that can change the organization, but it also can make us look bad, make the branding look bad. And that was challenging, and there was some communication things that we had to work out, from that. But now that program is maxed out already. We have more potential for funding from that program through grants than any program we have. So it's just fabulous now where we're at. But I can tell you that one year, and I think it was 2013, I was thinking, what in the world did we just do?
So did you lose any funding over it, or were your funders pretty understanding?
The funders were pretty understanding, so we were fortunate. And I think another thing that saved us was our integrity of the brand, and then also the integrity of the staff, and the board, knowing that it was a strong board. I think people still, people will forgive you if you mess up, but if you continue to mess up, then you're at risk, I should say.
So it's important to build up that credibility and.
Yeah. I call it leadership capital.
Yeah, that's a good word. I kept on thinking capital. I just couldn't figure out leadership capital. That's a great word for it, or two words, in fact.
Yeah.
So as the organization has grown, as you've added staff, has your leadership style changed at all?
Yeah, and it's challenged me because I am by nature, just because how in leadership you take all these profiles, you probably have been profiled to death over your life, and but in a lot of ways I'm a controller, in certain aspects, and so when I started adding staff, it was very important for me to allow them to lead and me stay out of the way, and so as I was gradually turning things over to people, I had to really allow them to take the leadership role in those areas. So I had to be very careful about, one, who I hired, make sure I hired the right type of personality that we could all work with and we all understand. And I have been truly blessed in the staff I have, because I think we all respect each other and respect the talents of each other. And in a lot of ways, we're all different, very different, but in a lot of ways, we're all the same. And so it's been a great experience for me.
Great. And did that realization just evolve on its own, or was there an instance or a series of instances that made you realize you needed to let go and empower other people?
I read a book, and I'm sure a lot of people read John Maxwell's book, The 21 Laws of Leadership. And one of the laws he talks about, which just kind of sticks in my head, is the law of the lid. And the law of the lid talks about, knowing basically your limits, and that someday you're going to come to a place that you maybe only could take the organization to a certain point. And then from there, you almost have to have other people come in to help take it to the next level. And so that just really hit home with me, knowing that, I have a certain time that I'll be with this organization, that I can carry it. But the only other way I can, allow it to grow is to bring other people in who has different experiences, different leadership, and allow them to help influence the organization. Even though I might still be the executive director, I'll still allow them to have the influence that will help lead it. And so that particular book was pretty powerful for me.
Great. That is a good book. And the Law of the Lid is actually my favorite as well. So in closing, do you have any words of encouragement or inspiration for other nonprofit leaders who are listening in?
Yes, I wrote down some things here I thought that I've learned and I've heard from other people that I thought was pretty cool. One is, don't be afraid to ask the stupid questions. Don't be afraid to encourage. Don't be afraid to give credit to others. Don't be afraid to dream. And know your limits. Just know who you are, where you can go. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And there are people out there who really want to be a part of something good, something that's working. And when we talk about board members, I've never had a problem getting a good board, because they see it's exciting, they see it's growing, they see that you value their input. And I'm just real excited about where we're headed.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark, again, for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
And thank you to all our listeners for everything you do to make the world a better place.
Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast with KIRSTEN BULLOCK. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll check out our prior episodes and that you'll pass along our web address, nonprofitleadersnetwork.com, to your friends and colleagues in the nonprofit sector.